Today I wanted to talk about some risky Toyota Tacoma mods that you might want to reconsider. You know, I'm out cruising around and I've been thinking about some of the mods and things I've done to the truck. And you know, honestly, there's a few that I've done that really, if I didn't have the channel and didn't do this, you know, as a way to make a living, I probably would have reconsidered doing some of them because they are risky. So first of all, the lift. You know, the lift is probably, I would guess, one of the #1 mods on the Toyota Tacoma. That, along with wheels and tires, which have a little bit of risk themselves. I'll get to that in a minute. But the lift itself can be pretty darn risky, depending on how high you go. I think if you stay below, about 2 inches, maybe 2.5 inches, you're going to be okay. But if you go above that, really above 3 inches or so, like 3 1/4 or more, then you're going to have problems unless you address other things. And I know this because it happened to me. On my 2020 Voodoo Blue Toyota Tacoma, I ended up with a lift in the front of about 3.5 inches, something like that. And I thought everything was good. I didn't really care for the look too much because it kind of changed the front end and I didn't really like the way that it looked, but the ride was okay and it was a pretty decent lift and the truck looked awesome. I mean, it was badass, you know. But I soon discovered I had a problem. I was underneath the truck. I don't know, I was doing something. I think I was taking the skid plate off for some reason. And I noticed all this grease on the back of the skid plate, you know, the part up against the truck. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I'm like, where did this come from? And at first, I kind of blamed it on the dealership. I had taken the truck in to have an oil change done. And I thought that they did a sloppy job and slopped oil all on top of my skid plate and that's what it was. But I was wrong. That's not what it was. Because of the angle of the CV axle, I had actually torn the CV axle boot. And all of the grease in that boot, you know, that keeps everything all nice and lubed. Lube is important. But it had spewed out through the tear in the CV axle, the boot itself. That made a mess. Of course, that leads to bigger problems. I mean, there's grease in there for a reason, right? All of it was gone. I would have had to have it repaired. If you're handy, you could do it yourself. Not going to cost you as much money, but that's a thing that I would not have done myself because I have no experience nor the tools to do it. Would have cost me probably somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $1,800, something like that, to have that thing repaired. And then, even after having it repaired, I still would have had bad geometry and I would have had another problem. So it would have led to more cost as far as that lift goes. A pretty risky mod that you might want to reconsider if you're concerned about changing the geometry and other problems that a lift can cause. In the end, I'd still probably do it because I love a lifted Toyota Tacoma. Now, I mentioned the wheels and the tires. It's really the offset. You know, the risk here is tearing up your fender well. I mean, if you've got an offset that is going to make it contact all of the bits underneath, you're going to have a problem. And it can be as little as just annoying. I mean, something that you know, don't really want to deal with as far as the rubbing and that kind of stuff, to something more severe, like actually ripping up the fender well or even contacting the suspension parts behind, depending on what kind of an offset you go for. So it can be a bit risky. You just need to make sure you know what you're going to end up with, which can be kind of difficult sometimes. Next up, cutting. Specifically, the front bumper. I just did a front bumper replacement where I had to cut the front of the truck. Something that was pretty daunting for me because when you start cutting up your truck, there's no going back. I mean, unless you cut too thin, you can't replace it, you know? You can't take off more when it's already gone or put it back on. It can be pretty darn risky because you're going to end up replacing the whole front end of your truck if you screw it up, if you care about what the front of your truck looks like. Now, my job, it actually came out okay. There's a video on the channel about it if you want to check that out. But it came out okay, but I will say it's not perfect. And I had pointed out the flaws in it in the video. So just something to be aware of that can be pretty risky if you make a mistake when you're doing that. If you're gonna do it, I would always make sure that you leave material as opposed to taking too much off, because you can always cut a little bit more, but you can't put it back. I love the look of it, once again, like the lift, and I wouldn't hesitate to do it, but something that you might want to consider if you're looking at doing that. Lastly is anything electrical. You know, once you start messing around with the electrical bits of your truck, you can cause all kinds of problems. Not only to the device that you're trying to connect up, but also to the truck's wiring itself. You know, years ago, me and a friend decided to put a radio in his car. It was a brand new Ford Escort. That'll take you back, right? But we were putting a radio in, we got it all hooked up, turned that thing on, and it actually was smoking. Now, why it didn't blow a fuse, I don't know. It should have, probably because we didn't install the fuse in line, or maybe there wasn't even an inline fuse for it back then. But it actually started smoking. Who knows what kind of damage it caused or what kind of gremlins might have occurred beyond the installation of that radio. He actually had the car repossessed not long after that. But it's just a very risky thing if you don't know what you're doing. Anything electrical, which is one reason why I like the wireless controller that I have. Now, obviously, you wouldn't use that on a radio, but if you're adding lighting and things, that just hooks up to the battery via the ground and the positive, and it has an inline fuse, and it has its own fuses in it. You merely hook up all of your accessories to it, and then control it with a wireless remote. Definitely a good way to go if you're not real comfortable with doing electrical things, to kind of keep it a little bit separate from the truck, so that if you do have a problem, it's probably only going to affect the accessory that you're installing, not all of the wiring in the truck. I mean, could you imagine you got a brand new Toyota Tacoma, you're putting a set of, I don't know, driving lights or an LED light bar or whatever in it, and the thing starts smoking? That would be terrifying for me. Anyway, I just wanted to get on here. I was just thinking about that. You know, part of this channel is to try to give a heads up to anybody out there doing mods and things, because I have found in a lot of the videos, the install videos out there, the creator kind of tends to smooth over the rough parts. Well, those are the parts that I want to know about. I mean, anybody can turn a screw, tighten a bolt, but I want to know the potential issues. And there's just a few if you're doing those things to your Toyota Tacoma. Risky things that you might want to consider before going out and dropping the dough on that mod. Leave a comment, let me know. Ever done anything to your truck? Any kind of a mod that turned bad? Maybe you shouldn't have done it. I'd be curious to know. Also, real quick, I do have 2 additional channels. Robmotive Rides, all about the Mercedes-Benz. I just did a very risky mod on that car. And Robmotive JT, all about the Jeep Gladiator. Check them out, and if you're interested, why not subscribe? And don't forget to click the subscribe button on this channel. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.